around and get more signatures to withdraw.
So he was just basically going to ignore the law prescribing how you submit and withdraw.
Well, no, he couldn't. I mean, that's not within his purview. What happened is that then his letter withdrawing it was not effective.
Right.
Because he was only one person. So had he gone and as the presenter of the citizens petition, had he gone and gotten more signatories to agree to withdraw their signatures from the petition, then it would have been an effective withdrawal.
Right.
Yeah.
But you said he couldn't or wouldn't. I'm not sure which.
No, I said he wouldn't go around. I believe there wasn't a letter that said that he was not going to go around and ask for signatures.
So he knew what he was supposed to do, but refused to do it.
That's reading into it. That's reading into it.
Well, I say he wasn't.
All we know is that the withdrawal was not effective, and his resubmittal of it was also not effective because it was still the citizens petition was never off the ballot. Once it had the more than 10 signatures it was on, the selectmen couldn't modify it, we couldn't condition it. Citizens petition has its own rules. It was on the ballot.
Can it be removed from the ballot because this planning board hasn't held a hearing?
Nope. Town meeting has the right to either vote it up or down or pass over it.
No,
or amend it.
They're not, under the law, they can't vote on it. Should they choose to ignore the law and vote on it, the Attorney General's office is going to disapprove it because it hasn't followed the process. But you can't change the warrant once the warrant is closed and printed. What would happen is that when you get to the motion stage, the motion would be to take no action.
Yeah.
So this will come up at town meeting.
And with any luck, we will.
It'll die in a technicality.
We'll pass over it, and we don't have to make it into a conflict. It doesn't have to be a public conflict. It could just be the issue comes up. There's a process to go through. We now know that there's a process to go through, and we just pass over it as a group. It doesn't have to be a conflict.
That was the reason for tonight's meeting. We wanted to disclose that the planning board had not taken a position, and we didn't want to really have a fight with the ZBA in public. It was not what we intended.
It's all fine.
As an aside, you bring up the ZBA. I understand Mr. Bowler's in the hospital. Is there anyone that knows his condition?
Jen Scuteri and I visited him yesterday. He's at Beth Israel. I forget if he went in Monday or Tuesday. He's getting good treatment and expects to be released hopefully Sunday.
Good news. Excuse me for interrupting that. I feel it would be beneficial at least to get this case law from the Attorney General's law office into the hands of the town council.
I'd appreciate that.
I do have a question, since we're talking about process and procedures, I do have a question for the town council. And it relates to, since people are taking public positions in advance of applications that may be brought before the board. If an individual member publicly states opposition to a bylaw or opposition to an application before it's filed, what recourse, how does the board deal with that?
There's no easy answer to that. The problem you run into with, there are two distinct issues there. As we, if you're giving opinions before applications are before the board, if you're expressing your support or opposition to something that you as a municipal official are going to have to take an action on, you run the risk that whatever the decision of the board is, it can be challenged because the process was circumvented and the vote was based not on the evidence before the board as required under the permit rules, but rather on some other extrajudicial opinion or evidence or testimony, documentation, something that the board was not supposed to consider. So individuals of the board are supposed to hold their opinions and their judgments until they have applications before them. They, as part of the public hearing, can ask all the questions they want, get all the evidence they want, and then form an opinion. If you form an opinion and voice that opinion publicly, you raise problems not only for yourself, but for the board's decision when it gets reviewed by a court, if somebody is unhappy with the board's decision. So you may raise, as you might have raised a conflict of interest issue, showing that you're biased, you have an undue influence from somebody else for your opinion. That would be a conflict of interest issue. But if your vote is critical to the way that the decision of the planning board came out, you could put the decision of the planning board in jeopardy.
So what's the recourse for the board when it knows or a member has stated that opposition in various forums? What's the recourse for the board?
Virtually none.
Okay.
You can censure a board member for whatever force that has, but as an elected member of a board, the elected member is supposed to act in their interest as a municipal official and self-govern their actions and their opinions.
Could they, if they acknowledge that, can they be asked to recuse themselves?
Yes, you can ask a board member to recuse him or herself, but again, that's going to be a decision of the individual member.
Okay.
Seeing we're on your nickel, we got your attention for a minute. Guide me and the board through the process. Mr. Lawrence conducted a letter today, addressed it to Claudia, and sent a copy to me. He called me up by phone and instructed me, asked me to present his letter to the board this evening. Now, Mr. Mitchell is saying that I shouldn't do that. I should distribute it to Christine, who will then distribute it to the board, I presume. What is the appropriate way to do it?
As soon as you, as a member of the planning board, got that letter, it's a public document. So anybody can request it. As soon as it comes in, anybody can get a copy of it. What I took from what Mr. Mitchell was describing was what the general practice of your board is, not what the law requires.
If a citizen expresses, wants his opinion to be out and addresses it to the planning board, I would think it would be our duty to distribute it.
Well, as I say, it's a public document, so anybody can get it, but no, it's not your duty. You as a board control what you want to do in your meetings. So if usually, it comes to the judgment of the chairman to decide what's going to be circulated during the meeting to the other members of the board. And if for some reason a majority of the board does not like what the chairman is stating or planning to do, it's controlled by a majority of the board, but not by one individual member of the board versus another individual member
Well,
of the board.
advise me. Now, I've got case law from the Attorney General. I've got two letters from Rob, who wanted the Attorney General's opinion and his opinion to be expressed to the board tonight, because the board was doing what it was doing tonight, and he wasn't here. So he just asked now, Rick says that that's wrong, I should have given it to Christine, and that she would distribute it maybe. Because there's a great deal of maybe in what Christine does. Because she doesn't work for the planning board, she works at her own admission for Michael. So we have no control over what she does. Which is the point that Peter's trying to make. I'm not trying to lay it on you, this is the way it
It's the way
works.
she acts, you know.
So,
Are you suggesting that and forgive me if I'm misunderstanding this, but are you asking that if you get a document, whether you can email it to all of us, or whether you have to email it to Christine and have her email it to all of us? Is that what you're asking?
I think my answer to that is, I think an earnest communication to this board ought to be distributed to the board.
So he can distribute it to everybody, the piece of paper, but when you send an email, you have to be careful about making a discussion about aspects of it, correct?
Yeah, I suspect that's where the policy came through of putting it through Christine,
Yeah.
because
I'm not-
very often what
I
happens.
appreciate that, I'm not talking about discussion,
It doesn't take much for it to be a discussion.
Yeah, that's the,
And
that's the policy.
that's the concern, that as soon as something is sent around, very often, a member of the planning board or any other board that gets things by email, it's very understandable. Somebody will write back and hit reply to all, saying, well, I think that this needs to be modified, or it just happens. And so for that reason, it is recommended that things go through somebody like Christine or Maureen Hickey if it's the.
but Christine acts as a censor.
Well,
And this is a problem I had, like a communication I got from her yesterday, recommending that the pool operation, recommending that the pool operation was an wonderful opportunity for the community. That's not her place to make that opinion, but it's in writing and it's on my desk.
I
And
can't
I'm
comment.
not asking you to defend it or not,
Yeah.
but that's what we're living with. That's what we're living with.
Yeah, I know, I can't comment on
A person who is
that.
not charged with making policy is making policy.
No.
And it
she-
also makes
no,
by
she expressed
policy
an
by
opinion.
making decisions about what not to distribute. So here I am tonight wishing earnestly to distribute to the board information submitted by a man, he has a right to go on a vacation once a year or something or other, distribute it to the board, but I'm told I shouldn't do it that way.
But, Mr. Howard, you're the chairman. If you want to distribute it during your meeting and you got this, go ahead and do it.
Right, you're in a
Unless the
public session.
majority of the board tells you no, but that's not what I'm hearing.
Right, you're in a
And
public
you know,
session.
Ms. Woods already got to put into evidence a letter from Mr. McKean, so we know that the process can happen that way. That's okay. I am not telling you that you can't distribute it.
All Rick was saying is that typically, if we have something to distribute to the board, we send it to Christine and she distributes it to the rest of the board. That way, if anybody hits reply all, it doesn't go to all of us.
Right.
That's the only reason, that's the only thing you were saying, was that's our general policy.
I'm in agreement with you,
Right.
and I feel it would be worthy of the board to understand the variables that are presented by both sides before we go into another meeting, you know, so we know Rob's side, we know the Attorney General's side, we know Donna's side, it's a side, excuse me, I didn't mean side. If not, we're working in a vacuum.
Okay, the policy, Ed, is that when you get something, it goes to Christine, Christine distributes it. That's always been the policy, that's how we operate. Now we're in a public session. You have the discretion, since we're in front of the public, we're being recorded, to distribute that. The only time it becomes a problem is when it's in a private venue. So please feel free to distribute it. Or read it.
Long document, so,
Why don't you just pass it out?
Yeah.
Just pass it out.
like.
I'd love it, yeah, thank you. Thanks.
Secret
Donna,
society.
I don't know whether I can ask this question, it's nice having counsel here, but I look at you and I can never tell, you have a perfectly masked face, so I never can tell if I'm doing it right or wrong, but maybe I'll turn to Mark. In Mr. Mitchell's last comment, is how can the board who initiated and signed this petition, I want to be clear with you that there was no collusion, that I was asked to sign it as a citizen. No, I didn't meet in my basement, in my chicken coop, that there was nothing untoward. I said, it sounds like a good idea, okay, I'd be willing to sign it. I want you to understand there was nothing untoward going on here, Mark.
Understood.
Why would I be that stupid? If I erred, I'm sorry, but my intention was not evil. Okay, and I was not, my intent was not to strip, quote unquote, the ZBA of its site plan authority. That was not my intention. I just have worked with site plan for years, and it was always in planning. Always, because it's land use. I did it for 8 years in Vermont. The site plan was always under the authority of the planning board. I wasn't trying to offend Bill Bowler. I wasn't trying to offend the ZBA. It's more efficient. I want you to understand that.
I promised that the public would have a chance to speak if there's any comments from the gallery.
Well, I'd like to say a couple of things.
Can you put your name
Do
on the
me a
record?
favor,
Speak up, I forgot.
Say your name.
You don't know who I am. Bill Derry, Chabaco Road. As you all know, I was the only one in the audience when all of this started. And at that time, I said to you, I think you would be well advised to go to the AG or get some legal advice, because at that time I thought that Mr. Mitchell was totally wrong, that there was no improprieties to the open meeting law. And the only reason I said that is because of my 3 years' experience on the school committee, where I've attended a number of the sessions with lawyers explaining the detail. Anyways, I'm disappointed that you guys went into executive session, because obviously I've been involved from the ground up in all of this that's going on. And I was kind of curious to know, because Mr. Mitchell had made some very, 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 very disheartening accusations about fines and so forth. He went into a half-hour rant accusing the board members of everything short of murder. And I am exaggerating that, obviously, to make the point. I'm a little disappointed in the town, because I see in the town a tremendous amount of individuals attacking other individuals in boards. In this particular instance, it was Mr. Mitchell. I've known Mr. Mitchell for 3 or 4 years, and we have our differences. And just like I have differences with Mark, but I don't call Mark names. This is a total colossal waste of time. Whether or not the 3 individuals signed a petition, a citizen petition, and it may not have been the most politically nice thing to do relative to the other boards, is probably a question. But the fervency of this whole meeting, and the accusations, and the garbage, I'm sorry, it's just plain garbage that's coming out. I really, really, as a citizen, am disappointed to see. It's not the reason you guys are here, okay? It's just, and I don't know what the personal vendetta is that Rick has against the other members of the board, but it is very apparent that he does have that. And he has now allowed his personal feelings to overcome his judgment. And I think the board should censure him for that type of an attack. He could have very simply brought up the question very nicely and posed it as a problem that he saw it may be happening, and you could have investigated it and found that it was or was not, take the appropriate action, and it all goes away. Look at the people that are in this room. It's ridiculous. Again, I don't know what his problem is, but I have, as you know, I'm a very outspoken person. I speak my mind. I try to speak the truth. I disagree with Peter. I don't call him names. You know, he has one view, I have another. Okay, fine. That's how it works. Okay, maybe I learned something from him. Maybe he learned something from me because I have a different opinion. But to sit and use the system as a political attack and to try and demean a person, or persons in this case, using those types of things is just unconscionable. And again, I would love to see this board censure Mr. Mitchell, for his outlandish attack. It was uncalled for. Thank you.
Any other public comments?
I'd just like to add that I think, Claudia, you hit it on the head. It's how we treat one another. That's all. We're gonna disagree, but we're better than this. We are far better than this. I hope we're better than this, or I live in the wrong town, to be honest with you. And it's not just this board. It's a systemic problem that we have in this town. And I hope that we, mention the people in this room, I hope that we turn it around. Make an effort to turn it around however we do it. I think the people that have made errors should hold themselves accountable and make apologies. I don't think censors, I think censor, with all due respect, is just adding fuel to the fire. The point is, everybody take a deep breath, relax. We're here because we care about this place, and treat each other nicely. Even if we made a mistake and did something wrong. Nobody here is doing anything intentionally to do anything hurtful to a board or a town. We're trying to do the best that we can. And if somebody has a problem with it, pick up the phone and make a call, like the old days. And just have a discussion. I heard this happen. It concerns me. Can we talk about it? Instead of bringing all of these people out tonight for now, what, an hour and a half? This all could have been done with a phone call, and I encourage this board, I encourage our Board of Selectmen. We have the same type of work to do, and I hope we do it. And I encourage you all to do it as well. Because it is, Rick, you said the word embarrassing. This behavior is embarrassing.
Non-professional.
And let's stop it. It's easy to stop. This is, of all the problems we have to fix, this is an easy one to fix because it's just how we treat each other. So, thank you.
Strangely enough, I think Don will back me up, that we have the right under the First Amendment to be as obnoxious as we want to be. And so we have to defend that right. I've drawn a couple of conclusions from this event. One is that we need to resolve this equitably, because we'll scare off any citizen participation in our government. We won't have people that will sit on committees and take abuse, no matter how stupid they are, or how dumb they are, or how outlandish their suggestions. If we do not behave ourselves, we will be all by ourselves. That's one observation. The second observation, I don't bring it up for action tonight, but I would suggest that it's something that the board can consider for our next meeting or two, is that maybe the board should, from its own members, establish something like a sergeant of arms who has the responsibility to intervene if things get rough. And then hopefully that he never has, or he or she has a job to do. And there has a job that has to be done. I do know that Peter one time, when he was recommending me to to sit on the CPC committee, and he made an interesting statement. He said, these are a nice bunch of people. And I thought that was, and they turned out to be a nice bunch of people. And I thank Peter for, you nominated me to be a member of the CPC. I would like to see what happens with the planning board to be a nice bunch of people. I promise more discussion from the board if it's appropriate. If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'd like to make a comment. I was just waiting to see if anyone else wanted to make a comment, but I'm Janet Aldridge. I'm videotaping, and my observations over the past 4 public hearings that I've taped, I think that Hamilton needs to look at affirmative action and get some more women on the board, and that's going to sound sexist, maybe, but I think that Claudia has done a remarkable job as a female withstanding all of this tumult. And also, I think because we're sort of, we've all sort of as a nation turned our back on God, I think that we should remember that today and this weekend is the Feast of Esther, and Haman had gallows ready to take out his Esther's whole nation, and he ended up on the gallows. I really want to, think that's what town meetings are like, okay? They're really like taking out someone, throwing the gallows up in front of the place, and having a heyday watching them, and it can turn on you. So that's my comment on this thing. I try to educate people on the public record open meeting law, because to me that is what the people have. That's the noose around the public servant's neck to carry out the public business honestly. So we have an opportunity now with video cameras to videotape public hearings, and that's what I do. I try to promote them, and I get myself in the middle of a lot of places that are probably uncomfortable, and I say, why did I do that? But that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Can I just make a comment?
Yeah. If you'll make it a joint German motion after that.
The planning board are a bunch of good people too, and they're volunteers. The only reason this came up was the perception of conflict of interest and open meeting laws. And that's why we asked the town council to instruct us. I think we've learned a lot about it, of process, and this board serves at the being voted in, and that we're responsible to the public, and we mainly have to bring out new bylaws and hold public hearings and so forth. I think that's far better and more effective way of working together than acting as private citizens and bringing warrant articles and changes through a voting process at town meeting. So I hope we've learned a lesson and we can work together, because as a body we can collaborate and create a sense of what works for the town and the community we are responsible to.
Yeah, it's going back to what Mark said earlier about all these things that people are looking to us to advance or at least talk about. We need to be able to work together on those things, and at least appear that we're working together on those things, and not have the impression that there's a few people behind the scenes or whatever it is, because we just can't do that. And we need to put this behind us as best we can and just move forward. And I agree with what Jeff said about just working collegially, and and that will only help get more people out to these things and help all of us in the process doing planning for the town. Many of us sit on other boards, and we try to do that on those boards, and to be open and to invite the public and so forth. But we just need to again just handle things properly, whether it be addressing someone at a meeting or knowing what the law is and following it, and not going behind anyone's back to do anything. You know, everything needs to be out in the open, and, or we're just gonna shut people out, I think, like Jeff said earlier, and, you know, I've only been here, 5 years now, but I've immersed myself onto a few boards, and it's, I wanna be involved, and I don't take anything personally if anything's said to me in any of these meetings or at work or whatever, but, it's all about advancing this town and developing, might not be the right word, but, just increasing the betterment of this town and getting people like me involved, because that's where, I'm the next generation of people in this town, and I wanna show my friends that sitting on these boards and serving the town and its people is a good thing, and that it can be fun at times. Yeah, it's got its ups and downs, but, I just wanna get, people like myself involved more, and, not that I don't, everybody that's been on this board for a long time, absolutely appreciate it, but I think, there's obviously an end to people's tenure on these boards, and it's, it's up to people like me or younger people or whatever to continue these on, so, because, again, I just wanna say that, I don't know, we need to work together, really, is what it comes down to. I think we've all said that in one way or another tonight, but, it's just the way it needs to be.
Motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.